Welcome.
Bonjour.
Vous écoutez le podcast Dirty Feet sur les ondes de No More Radio.
You're listening to the Dirty Feet podcast on the No More Radio Network.
Nous sommes vos animateurs.
Et animatrices.
We are your hosts, Allison Burns,
JD Papillon.
Et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
Listen in.
Écoutez.
We're gonna move you.
Hello, this is Stephanie here for another episode of Dirty Feet. As you may or may not know, I'm in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan right now for the second time for the Fringe Festival. The great thing about this Fringe is it's quite intimate, only 33 shows, and the festival really gives you a chance to connect with the audience, with other companies. The streets are closed with food trucks, buskers, craft vendors. We've got some theater, some dance, and yeah, a special guest today. We have Natasha Martina, who we talked to in Montreal.
You actually spoke to Anna.
We talked to Anna about her wonderful, wonderful show, Displaced, who was a show that was nominated for many awards in Montreal, got great reviews, and is kind of kicking ass here in Saskatoon. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I am so curious to see your process and how you decided to specialize in movement. So maybe talk about your background in education.
My background? Okay. Quite simply, I studied as an actor. So I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts actually in the States. So I went to Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle. And already then, my prof saw that I had a flair for movement or physical character work, so they were often giving me the roles that really required lots of character work. And my movement teacher at that time was already sort of pushing me in that realm, but I was like, I'm going to be an actor, and I'm not going there, and blah, blah, blah. And so I worked as an actor quite consistently for about 7 years after undergrad. And I also, funny enough, had to make some money, right, as an actor.
Surprise.
Surprise, surprise. And I actually became a yoga teacher at that point, and I was a fitness instructor. I was doing lots of physical things, and that's how I was making my money. And then one day I sort of thought to myself, how can I blend my love for theater and my love for movement? Because I did start off as a dancer, so I danced all through my childhood. And then when I was about 15, that's when I fell into acting, and my dancing was sort of there, but not really as much anymore, and theater took over. And so then, I sort of hit my late 20s, and I thought, okay, how can I blend those two things together? And I was talking to a really, really good friend of mine who was living in London, England at the time, and she wanted to study voice and speech. And I sort of told her my dilemma about how can I merge movement and text. And she said, well, Central School of Speech and Drama is just starting a movement studies course, an MA movement studies, and the light bulb just went off. Mm-hmm. And I thought, no. And so I looked into the program. I thought, yeah, this is exactly what I want. So the program was a blend of pedagogy and movement direction. And I applied. Had to wait 2 years because they delayed the program for 2 years because they really wanted an excellent cohort for the first year. And so they accepted me right off the bat, but they delayed it. And then 10 of us took that course, and it was life-changing. And I was fortunate enough after to not only teach, but I did some movement direction with artists in London. And I worked in several theatre schools in London, and then landed the job here in Saskatoon.
Oh, wow.
And that's sort of how I made my trek.
Your trek, yeah. And for those interested in studying in the States, what do you find different from the education system here? Was it new? Was it a shock at first, or? It
was a conservatory program. Mm-hmm. I would probably say it's quite similar to NTS, National Theatre School, or I would say it's same to UBC or U of A. I think there's a lot of similarities, to be honest. The funny thing is, when I was living in the States, I always made such a point to say I'm Canadian. That was one thing. And now looking back, my training at Cornish was amazing. It was absolutely fantastic. But knowing I wanted to be an artist in Canada, I probably would have chosen to study in Canada, just knowing that.
And if you were able to kind of backtrack and study at a different school here in Canada, what would that be? Is there one that stands out that you were...
Oh, probably the top theater schools, which would have been UBC, U of A, National Theater School, maybe York. I should really say the University of Saskatchewan since I teach there. But University of Saskatchewan is not a conservatory program, and those programs are. And that's what I wanted at that time. So,
And now, as a teacher, how was that transfer to kind of go from, being a student, wanting to create work and having that flame, and now wanting to almost share that passion off? That must be quite rewarding.
I love teaching. Yeah. I completely love teaching. And exactly that, I feel... I'm given such a gift, right? Because I'm planting all these seeds with these students. I'm giving them all this information for them to take hold of and create their own work. And there's actually, in the 9 years I've been living here, physical theater wasn't dominant in any way that I saw, and that's actually why I created my company. Now, I don't think that's the case. I think there are lots of things that especially our students are doing that are quite physical, and in that sort of territory, they're going more into the physical, which is exciting, which is great.
So do you feel that you have an influence on the...
I don't know. I don't want to say that. I'm not so sure if that's the case. Maybe they're just being more exposed to other things that are happening. And also, too, we're creating a much larger community now in Saskatoon.
Yeah.
The theater community has grown tremendously in the last 9 years. So it's probably an accumulation of a whole bunch of things.
And now to kind of leap into your beautiful production, Displaced. I was actually reading the Star Phoenix review that just came out recently, saying that the play breathes like a human being.
I know, isn't that such a beautiful quote?
Kind of gave me
I was
goosebumps.
like, oh, I love that.
And I think what really interests me mostly about this work is just the fact that the subtleties of that composition in the space and of the movement. And a thing I struggle with going into theater festivals is labeling my work as dance.
Right.
Because it scares people, because they don't think it's accessible, or they're worried they won't get it, or they're not, used to watching dance, so they move away from it. So what was very successful about this piece is people are like, this is theater, but they are actually watching a beautiful piece of choreography.
Right.
So do you consider yourself a choreographer, or how do you kind of define that fine line, and have you ever created a piece that you call dance?
No, I've never created a piece that I would call dance, and I actually wouldn't call myself a choreographer. There's a term, it goes back to that term that I used earlier, movement direction, which is a term they use in Europe a lot. You don't hear it so much here in Canada or in the States. It's sort of slowly coming in. So I feel I'm more of a movement director, if that makes sense, where I'm going to use the word choreograph. I create gestural scores, or I create moments in time that are influenced by movement. But what I would say, I don't know. It's hard to say. I just wouldn't call myself a choreographer, because my dance training isn't as prevalent anymore than it used to be when I was younger. Certainly.
I find it really interesting, that kind of terminology of being like, we've got, in the Fringe this year, there's Bow and Arrow, who's doing a physical comedy, is what they call it when they're advertising it, but it's actually clown.
Right.
And they realize that saying clown scares people as well. So the accessibility is when marketing is extremely important. However, for Displaced, tell us about the process and what, for those who don't know, this is a story of 3 immigrant women who, I guess I'm just curious if if there's immigration in your background, or it's closely inspired to your roots and in your life, and if that's why you wanted to go that way.
Absolutely. So basically, to make a very long story short, I'd been working on this piece on and off since 2011. And when I say on and off, I mean once a year. Like for, sometimes it was 5 days, sometimes it was 2 weeks, sometimes it was 3 weeks, that kind of thing. The longest being 3 weeks in our 3rd developmental stage. And initially, my co-creator and I, Sue Mythen, we were going to create a piece about the Irish famine. And she lives in Dublin. She's Irish. And so I had done all this research on the Irish famine, and I actually gotten a grant to go to Dublin and, carry out some research and then workshop with her for 10 days in a studio and see what comes out. And what had happened was I went into the research library before we met in the workshop, and I started doing this research, and I was like, what connection do I have to the Irish famine? None. And I thought, how do I have a connection to this piece? And I thought, well, immigration. Because my mom, my dad, my godparents all immigrated from Switzerland, from Austria, and from Germany. And my godparents particularly immigrated almost right after the war, just a few years right after the war. And so I heard all their stories, and so funny enough, I went back to Sue and I said, I want to change the idea. And she said, great. What is it? I said, I want to make this piece about 2, possibly 3 women, and I want to place them in different time periods and have them come from different cultures. And Sue was all over it. She's like, that sounds great. So that's sort of how the piece arose. And so when we wanted to tie it back into the present, we thought of bringing in a new immigrant, and we tied it into the South Asian community, because if you look at the traditions of Canadian history, there has been a great European influx, and now there's a great South Asian influx of new immigrants coming to this country. And so it just tied itself beautifully, and I had worked on another show that required me to do a lot of research on Afghanistan, at that time, I'm not sure that's the case now, given what's happening in Syria, but at that time, Afghans were the largest refugee community in the world. So this was in the early 2000s. So that's also why we picked that community.
And it's interesting, this, 3 women from different periods, and just the thought of immigration, just the word immigration already gives this kind of slow, difficult movement forward, So it's a word filled with movement.
Well, it is, absolutely. And I also like to choose things that sort of provoke discussion. And immigration is a huge, heated debate. And in Quebec, too, we sort of, there was a huge topic in terms of the chadar the hijab, all that. I mean, I think so many people can relate in so many different ways.
And is it quite common for you to have political content in your work?
Well, this is the only second show I've created. And the first show was loosely based on the picture of Dorian Gray. And we were sort of looking at the idea of beauty and what does that mean. And there's a lot of topic and discussion around the obsession of beauty in sort of modern day culture. And so that was, in a way, absolutely provoking discussion, picking topics that sort of, create further discussion once you leave the theater.
And for Displaced, that's right now being presented at Broadway Theatre in the Saskatoon Fringe Festival, I believe you worked with a composer.
Yep.
Jason
Cullimore. Yep.
Maybe talk about your collaboration with him a little bit.
Yeah, that was great. Jason's out of Regina, and he had worked on another theater project that somebody had told me about, and I had listened to his music. And I mean, you would know this as a dancer, that when working with a composer, the most ideal situation is they're in the room with you at all times. Of course, we didn't have the money for that, so it was quite interesting for me to sort of I could have him in the room. I had him in the room for about a week of the rehearsals, and that was in the middle of the process. But often I'd have to go back to him and say, okay, this is the kind of sound I'm looking for. Can you build it around this? Or I would send him video clips of the movement, and then he would sort of compose, and then we would go back and forth. So it was great, and Jason did a great job, but it was also a very interesting kind of developmental process between the two of us, because in the ideal world, he'd be in the room and it would be a lot simpler.
Yeah, of course. We'd always love to have them right by the side. And so maybe talk about the selection of your 3 lovely actors.
Yeah. Well, I just held auditions here in Saskatoon. Mm-hmm. And specifically because I knew it was a movement piece, I had to also create some movement for them. Mm-hmm. I actually took them through a lot of improvisations. So I work with a few different methodologies, one being the viewpoints. And so we did a lot of viewpoints work, and it's a great improvisational technique. Mm-hmm. And so we did that, and sort of I could see how they would move in the space, and then I had them work with some of the scenes. The trickiest casting was for the Afghan character. Mm-hmm. And it was unfortunate that I couldn't find somebody here in Saskatchewan, because we're still a very small community. I mean, there's only 1 million people in the province, and not a lot of South Asian actors in this province. So I had to audition outside of Saskatchewan. I mean, I did look in Saskatchewan. And I had some great video submissions, actually, from across Canada.
Wow.
And it just worked out that the role of Dara went to Emma Leishram, and then Katie Moore plays Mary, and Anna Mazurik plays Sophia.
And Anna and Katie, did you teach them?
I taught Anna.
Okay.
And Katie is from Regina.
From Regina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what class? I'm just curious. What class did you teach Anna?
She had all my third and fourth year movement classes.
Oh wow!
And I don't know if I taught her in an acting class. I don't think I did. Oh, I can't remember. I think just the movement classes. So she had 4 terms with me. Yeah.
Mm. And what were the challenges bringing this piece to Montreal compared to presenting it here in Saskatoon?
Well, we don't have a community in Montreal, right? So that's always the hardest challenge for any company, any performer base. And so we really, it was a huge learning curve, I think, for all of us. And financially, as you know, it's a huge thing to bring a production to so far away. Yeah. So I would say those are probably the 2 biggest challenges. The community in Montreal was actually really receptive, lovely. Our numbers they grew. Every night they grew, but they were still somewhat small. But there were how many shows on the Montreal Fringe?
110.
110. Wow. So it's like 110 compared to 33. I mean, yeah, I think we were thankful for the numbers we did have.
Yeah. So. I think that's the main reason why I'm back here with 2 shows.
Yeah,
is because Saskatoon, the intimacy of the festival and the size of it just makes it such a different experience than the bigger fringes, the brother fringes of Winnipeg and Edmonton.
Exactly. Well, I think that's why you start to see some of the same artists come back, because they see the same thing. It's such a warm, receptive audience, and it is intimate and small, and it's accessible.
And do you find those qualities are kind of only here when the Fringe is on, or is this feeling of community and is that year round? How is it here in Saskatoon?
Yeah, I think Saskatoon has a really big heart, which allows it to be a big community. Absolutely. And I think, if anything, I mean, I'm not sure if this is the case now, but certainly when I first came, funding was really strong here in this province, and so there was a lot more opportunity for artists to create their own work. And besides funding, I think now most of our students are creating their own work because they see that as an opportunity to do something. Because we're limited with the number of theaters that we do have here. So if they want to do something, they've got to create it themselves, basically.
I was told by, who was it that told me? I think it was Nathan Howe was telling me that there is funding available for companies wanting to tour outside of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, there's Culture on the Go.
Culture on the Go.
Well, Culture on the Go is through the Sask Arts Board, and that's funding within the province. You have to do so many destinations, and so many within the province and so many outside of the province. So there is some, but let's see, last year I think they had something like 30 companies apply, and they gave 5 companies Culture on the Go money. So, it's still small.
And with the adjustments that are happening at the Canada Council and all of that,
right?
Grant money, you never want to take it for granted. It's
and Canada Council.
That's another one. That's a whole other.
That's a whole other conversation.
Have you? Do you apply on a regular basis for grants? What's your relationship with?
I've applied. Saskatchewan Arts Board has been very good to me. Over the years, they supported my first project, Dysmorphia. They've supported they supported the production end of Displaced, and in the middle of the developmental phase, they supported some of the money going towards Jason Cullimore for the composing. So they've been amazing. They've been really, really great and supportive. Canada Council, that's a hard nut to crack, and have applied several times and have gotten that lovely letter that says, we see your work has merit and we would have loved to give you the money, but
but we aren't.
So it's just, it's hard too, because I think when we're in the middle of the country, I just want to say it's tougher because we don't get such a large spotlight, right? It's kind of within the province. And
I could agree with that. But then on the other side, it's smaller and there may be more support. I know in Montreal, and I've got a little bit of an ongoing relationship with Canada Council and applications, and it's tricky. There are advantages and disadvantages depending on where you are. And it's
Absolutely.
like, Montreal, a lot of competition. Like, there's more funding.
Right.
So things like that. Oh, boy. And here, now you said it's been 9 years you've lived in Saskatoon?
I've lived 9 years, yeah.
Okay.
Crazy.
And what do you crave more of being in Saskatoon? What do you need more of? What's missing here?
Actually, I would say dance. I would say dance. I actually sit on the board of Dance Saskatchewan, and I actually wanted to sit on that board because I feel like dance does not have a big enough voice in this city. So there's Dance Saskatchewan, their major mandate is diversity, but as well as helping create or fund or support dance companies and then dance schools and so forth as well. So that was sort of why I sat on that board. And so I would definitely say the dance world is very, very tiny and still could really get a boost in this province.
Yeah, I think last year we connected with Dance Saskatchewan and interviewed them on our episode while we were here. I think I was quite surprised at the size of it, and we're hoping to maybe spark a few flames. Where my company, For Body and Light, is offering a dance workshop at Dance Saskatchewan, a contact dance workshop that's going to happen on Saturday, which is the 8th, I believe, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. So for those who are in town here in Saskatoon, please come join us. It's pay what you can, and for all ages and all levels, because we want to make it as accessible and fun as possible. So that's a little plug there.
No problem.
Great. What was your relationship with Dance Saskatchewan? How do you what is it like to be on the board?
Right now, I mean, I feel kind of bad because I've been away for the last couple of months. So I've sort of plugged out for a little bit, but they know that. My experience has been really great right now. Their mandate, like I said, right now is diversity, and you'll see that there's so much diversity happening in this province. So more and more companies and corporations are seeing the importance of diversity. And diversity in dance. So I think that's really important. So we don't just think of dance as ballet, contemporary, jazz, etc., but that there are numerous types of dancing, whether it's African or Egyptian or, you name it. So I really believe in that mandate of theirs. And so far the experience has been extremely positive, and I want to, once my schedule isn't so crazy, then I'll be able to give a little bit more time over to, because a part of our, responsibility is to volunteer and to help them. And so, yeah.
And speaking of time and schedules and free time, which seems to not exist for us lately, what's next after this run of Displaced? Are you planning on taking it elsewhere? Are you already in another project that you're kind of, jumping right into after this? What's coming up?
Nothing.
That's a vacation, maybe?
A vacation is coming up. Actually, my focus right now is on body-mind centering. So I don't know if you know that practice, but that's really where my heart is right now. And so I'm just about to graduate as a somatic movement educator. And so I sort of see that work probably influencing whatever piece I create next. BMC is going to somehow really delve deep into that piece, however that forms. But that's sort of where
that's the direction
is the direction I'm going right now.
And for those who don't know, body-mind somatics, maybe tell us a little bit about that.
So body-mind centering is a methodology that was created by a woman by the name of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. And the practice is the application of finding or experiencing the body within. And so somatics means experiencing from within. So only you can know what your experience is. Somebody else can't relay your experience. You only know what your experience is. And body-mind centering uses the basic neurocellular patterns, which is the patterns that a baby goes through from in utero to walking to communicating. And they use that as a foundation along with many other body systems, such as muscles, ligaments, the nervous system, the endocrine glands. They bring all these systems into play, and they utilize it through movement, voice, and touch. And the practice can be it's often used by dancers. It's often used by massage therapists or psychotherapists, and they use it as a link in. And I think for a lot of dancers, they often might, and even for an actor, so I think of the body systems as a great palette for character development. It's just an entry point in. Yeah. And I hope I explained that.
No, that was quite clear. Yeah. And this is definitely something that you're going to integrate into your work, and I
absolutely,
and I think that interest, having seen Displaced, is already integrated in that as well.
Yeah.
So what are your like? What are your dreams? What would you like to be doing next, without having to have it actually planned and set? But what is something that you're okay? I want to do this. Do you want to do something completely new, or do you want to push something further?
Well, funny enough, I think the whole BMC is new, and it's not new. I've been at it for 4 years now, 4 or 5 years now. And I just see myself going deeper into that work. And so it's got more of a therapeutic realm to it. So funny enough, I think I'll be tying more of that in. However that's going to surface, I don't know. And, eventually I might create another piece. I have some ideas brewing in my head for another piece. But honestly, I think I need to step away for a little while.
Which is quite important.
Yeah.
It's an important part of the process that we often forget.
Yeah, there's some recuperation time that needs to happen in my own body. And I think unless that happens, the creativity can't really flow. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a pause.
A little bit of a pause. Very important. Some TLC for the body. So thank you so much for talking about all of those things.
No problem.
So we've been talking to Natasha Martina about not only her beautiful, lovely human being breathing piece, Displaced, that's happening here at the Fringe Festival in Saskatoon, but also about her process and what she's been up to. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
For those who are around for the Fringe here in Saskatoon, it is running till August 8th. Tickets are $14, and you can find out more about the festival at portashcorpfringe.ca. Thank you so much for listening.
The Dirty Feet podcast is produced and hosted by
Produit et animé par
Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
We have Mainline Theatre, Montreal Improv Theatre, and Paula Flalo to thank.
Merci pour le soutien.
Vous pouvez visiter notre site web, écouter les derniers épisodes, lire notre blog, nous aimer sur Facebook et nous suivre sur Twitter.
You can visit our website, listen to past episodes, read our blog, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.
Show us some love and help us spread the word.
Montrez-nous un peu d'amour et aidez-nous à passer le mot.